Well, with Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Phase 4 of the MCU has finally come to its close. Thank God. What's up, everybody, and welcome to my review of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. If you are interested in any of my thoughts on the MCU up to this point, I've reviewed most of the movies of this universe, and I've ranked them a few times. I'll put a playlist up here that you can check those out. But I was not the biggest fan of the first Black Panther. I thought it was good, I thought it was fine, but I didn't think that it was anywhere near as good as it was being made out to be. Totally understood the cultural significance of it, totally understood the importance of it, but getting nominated for Best Picture, all that stuff, I thought that was a little bit laughable. It was just a really solid comic book film with some pretty shitty CGI. And in case you couldn't pick up on the hint in the intro, I have not been the biggest fan of Phase 4 of the MCU. I've always been a huge fan of Marvel, always been a huge fan of DC, even really enjoyed the Fox era of Marvel. So I've been a fan, I've been positive on more movies than not in all these universes, but Phase 4 of the MCU, especially on the Disney Plus side, has just been exhausting for me. It's been all quantity, very little quality. It's been seemingly directionless. I know what they're building to, and you can give me all the comic book lore you want, but there hasn't been this solid through line, this sense of consistency that we have had in all of the previous phases. This one's just been all over the place with multiverses and shows and new characters and side characters and female versions of the male characters and just everything, just like throwing spaghetti at the wall. And so Wakanda Forever is coming out at the end of that era and coming to close it out. And being that I wasn't the biggest fan of the first one, being that I wasn't the biggest fan of Phase 4 thus far, with a few exceptions, I didn't have the highest expectations for this movie. Trailers looked incredible. They were dealt the worst hand possible with the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, and I gotta be honest, I was really on the fence about their decision not to recast the character, and so I didn't know what to expect when I walked into Wakanda Forever. And I'm pleased to tell you that I actually had a pretty good time with this movie. I may have liked it more than the first film. I need to rewatch it. I will rewatch it before I rank the MCU this weekend, but I can without a doubt tell you that this is one of the high points of Phase 4, and it's good that they are going out on a high point. So with all that being said, let's kick it off with the positives of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and I just have to say, for all of the horrible hands that Ryan Coogler was dealt with this movie, it's amazing that he was able to pull off what he did. I mean, I would have been a little bit more forgiving on it even if this was just an average movie, but the fact that I think it's actually pretty damn good is just an amazing achievement. It's hard enough to make a great movie when everything is working for you, but when you have the lead of your franchise that tragically dies and then you have a pandemic all at the same time, I mean, I can't think of a worse situation to make this gigantic, culturally significant blockbuster. I mean, you got to follow up one of the most culturally significant blockbusters of all time with Black Panther. You have to end Phase 4, which has been mixed with a lot of people. You have to deliver on all of the emotions and all of the satisfaction, all of the respect to Chadwick Boseman. You've got to introduce a new Black Panther and try to get the audience to buy into a new Black Panther while they're saying goodbye to the previous Black Panther. And at the same time, just focus on making a good, solid story. And while some of those are certainly executed better than the others, I think that overall, he did a damn good job at balancing all of that and delivering the best possible Black Panther movie without our Black Panther that you could have asked for. I mean, I could imagine what this movie would have been if Chadwick Boseman did not pass. You could look at the plot of this movie and see, okay, the Black Panther sequel is there if T'Challa was the lead character, but them being able to retool all of that and focus a lot more on the emotional side and the grief and the loss of Black Panther, of Chadwick Boseman, and incorporate that into the story in a way that feels organic and in a way that's actually kind of cathartic for the audience, as well as cathartic for all the people that worked on this movie that suffered this tragic loss of their friend and their co-star and their family, and then had to go on and make this movie without him. And a lot of the performances in this movie, you really feel like it's the actual actor and their emotions coming out, not this character that they're portraying. And so it's a solid Marvel superhero story, but it also delivers on one of the more emotionally mature movies that we've seen in this universe yet. And pretty much the biggest reason why it is so emotionally satisfying is because all of the performances, every single person in this movie does a damn good job. Notably, Angela Bassett. Like, I've seen a few people say it before I was able to turn the camera on, so I'm not saying anything new, unfortunately, but I genuinely believe she might have a shot at getting at least an Oscar nomination. I mean, there's a scene in this movie where she's talking about loss and talking about what she has given as the queen that is gut-wrenching. And this is an actor that has just been around forever, and you've seen her do tons of different things, and this is in the conversation of the best acting that I've seen from her. And like, we never had really bad performances in the MCU, but it's not often you look at one and go, wow, that should be awards consideration right there. And I think they did a really good job at utilizing all of these characters that honestly were side characters and sidekicks in the first Black Panther movie and just kind of showed up in sprinkles in the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. And, you know, T'Challa was the story. He was the key figure of the movie. And now all of these characters get upgraded. They get promoted to kind of co-leads of the film. And every single one of them holds their weight. Every single one of them brings something new to that character that we know. Every single one of them has their own response and has their own way of dealing with the loss of T'Challa and how to move on and what does the new Wakanda look like. Is there ever going to be another Black Panther? Should there ever be another Black Panther? They did a really good job at taking these characters that in a lesser universe, in a lesser movie, could have been forgettable and making them suddenly able to hold this movie and continuing on, holding on to this franchise as capable leads. One thing that I really appreciated about Wakanda Forever is the balance and the utilization of humor here. There's not a ton of humor. There is some jokes, and I think most of them are actually pretty good. I got a good chuckle out of one of them. But they do something that Marvel has kind of forgotten how to do in Phase 4, and certainly has slipped up with a bit in the previous phases, which is not letting the humor undercut the drama, undercut the emotion, undercut the loss and the grief and all of the important things that is going on in the story. Way too often in this universe, you get these big, heavy, dramatic moments, and then immediately they're followed by some little low-hanging fruit dad joke, and sometimes that might be necessary, like once in a blue moon, just to kind of keep it fresh and keep everybody's emotions in check. But at the same time, it really does fuck up the gravity of what you're going for in your story. And I'm glad that with a story as important to this universe as Wakanda Forever is, and as serious as it needs to be taken, that they actually took it serious. Everything that goes on in this regarding emotions and grief and loss, they let you feel it. They let you marinate in those emotions. They let you understand what is going on in the characters and in the story before they undercut it by trying to make you belly laugh or giggle or snort in the theater. And going along with that, one of the things that struck me in this movie that unfortunately really shouldn't have to be pointed out as a positive, but I feel like, especially over the past, I'll say 5 or 6 years, it is something that is going to be important to a lot of people, being that this movie is now a almost exclusively female-led movie and a female-led franchise. I think they did an awesome job at not making that some kind of like a message or the forefront or something that overshadows everything else that's important about the movie. You have all of these characters that are strong women, but it's not a movie that's like, hey, girl power. It's a movie that's showing the loss and showing the grieving stages of a mother, of a sister, of a lover, and having all of them come together and kind of triumph over it together. And it's for that reason that I'll go ahead and tell all of you, if you're getting ready to type anything with the word woke in the comment section, do us both a favor, just unsubscribe to my channel, put the keyboard down, and go get a fucking life. Thank you. And finally, without giving any specifics, not that it's a gigantic reveal, not that there's any shocks or surprises in store, at least in my opinion, the way that they decide to continue on the Black Panther name, the way that they decide to position this character and this world of Wakanda for the future of the MCU, I think is satisfying, and I think it actually came across very organically, almost in a way to where you could almost believe the death of the character of T'Challa was a part of the plan all along, that it works out so well. Obviously it wasn't, and once again, that's just full kudos to the creative team of this movie that they were able to navigate that tragedy and come up with the end product that they did. Moving on to the mix, the first one is the action. Now, I will say that the action is shot better, and the CGI is significantly better than the first film, so that's the positive side of it, is that they have improved. I think they listened to a lot of the criticisms of the first film, which quite honestly was a pretty bad negative for the CGI and the bouncy video game character look that they had, especially in the third act of the first film. But on the negative side, it's still not near the best action that we've seen in this universe or just in superhero movies in general. I don't know if that's just Ryan Coogler's limitations as a filmmaker. He focuses more on the emotions and the characters and the depth of everything going on than the action sequences. or if he's just learning along the way. But the action sequences we get here, they're solid enough. None of them are all that noteworthy. And then you have the villain of Namor. Now, I think that the villains of this movie are introduced in a great way. They make a presence. They're kind of creepy. They're very intriguing. You're so interested in what's going on with them and what the lore is and what the motivations are. And Namor is kind of the figurehead of all of that. And he's a really interesting villain to look at. He's an interesting character that I definitely want to see more of in this universe. And though it's not a high bar, he's certainly one of the better villains in the MCU. But at the same time, I felt like he was underdeveloped. I felt like he was underexplored. And there was so much screen time, there was so much runtime, which we'll get into, that there was segments of this movie focusing on other characters that I wasn't nearly as interested in, that I would have easily have sacrificed those scenes to get more with Namor, because I never really feel like we get the best understanding or the explanation of his motives and of his mindset. You get a little bit of it, enough to just kind of grasp where he's coming from, but it doesn't fully make sense to me. It's not really a spoiler, but they kind of give you the impression that because he has been, living in the water, he has dwelled in the seas his entire life, when he comes up and sees how people are treated above ground, he decides to kind of take out the evil above ground in a certain way. But there's also a bit of a muddying of his morals, because he's not just focusing on the bad people like slave traders or people that are abuse of power or anything like that. He's kind of focusing on killing everybody. And so I was a little rocky on understanding where this guy's moral compass was and where his villainous version of motivations came from. And now moving on to the negatives, and these kind of go hand in hand, but I felt like the middle section of this film, like maybe the middle hour, was very awkwardly paced and was kind of slow. And I'm not saying it's boring, and I'm not saying you have to have action every single minute. With a story like this, you definitely need to have those more intimate kind of dialogue scenes and those more tempered down emotional moments. But there is a pretty good pace, a pretty good sense of urgency in the first act of the film, with getting us into the situation with T'Challa and moving on and figuring out where Wakanda is now post T'Challa's death, introducing our villains, introducing the main conflict of the movie. In the third act, when everything's coming to a head and you get this war between Wakanda and these sea dwellers, that's actually pretty heightened as well. And so everything in the middle, you start to kind of branch off and look at all these other characters from Wakanda and these other characters that we haven't seen for a while in the MCU, and it just kind of feels scattered. It kind of feels like a lot of it could have been trimmed, some of it could have been taken out entirely to keep the pace of the movie going at a much more entertaining clip, which ultimately leads to the biggest issue with the film, is that it's just way too damn long. And I'm talking like 20 plus minutes too long. Again, a lot of things to cover, a lot of bases to cover in this film, and I understand they wanted to give equal focus to all of it, but there was so many moments throughout this film where you really started to feel the runtime. I mean, there was a point where it felt like my body was ready for the final 15 minutes for that climax to happen in the story so that I could get up and move on. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, they haven't even introduced the new Black Panther yet. We got at least another 45 minutes. And driving home, I was thinking over all these segments, mainly segments in the middle of the film that I think easily could have been cut out, that really just felt like they're there for pieces of what's going to happen later on in the MCU, which this film seems least focused on than any of the movies I've seen in recent memory in Marvel. Like mainly the scenes with Martin Freeman and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, like those are the scenes where I'm like, okay, I don't feel like this has any relevance whatsoever to what's going on in Wakanda Forever. They're just there to talk about shit that's not going to matter for another year or two. And two other issues I have with the film, which are much smaller. I didn't really care much for the character of Ironheart. I think they utilized her character well as far as being relevant to the plot. She's kind of a MacGuffin device in human form, if that makes any sense. It will when you see the film, but she's obviously a significant character in the comics. I think she has a Disney Plus show that was already announced, so she's gonna be an important character. But for me, it was just kind of like a discount version of Iron Man, which maybe that's the whole point. But when I saw her, I'm like, no, I don't want to see anybody else doing the Tony Stark thing. And finally, the final battle of the movie felt like it was way, 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 way too small scale for what was going on. Everything else about the film felt bigger and more epic, and all these different sequences. You get scenes where these sea people are taking over this entire military ship. You get scenes where the sea dwellers are starting to fight with Wakanda, these large-scale battles, even this attack on Wakanda at one point. And when you finally get the final battle between Black Panther and Namor, it feels like that should be this huge significant moment, that should be this big set piece of the film, and it just didn't feel that way because of the setting, especially they decided to have it on, which is essentially just this beach just this little area of sand that's right next to the ocean, which also brought up a really big logic issue with me. And I'm going to try not to get too specific. Again, I don't really think it's a spoiler. It's nothing that's like a big reveal, but one of the methods that they decide to use in the film to weaken Namor is to get him away from water, essentially. Like, he kind of gets rejuvenated by being in the ocean, being that he's an ocean dweller. And so when you have the final battle of the movie and they've weakened him enough, and it's on this beach, and he's able to start getting his ass kicked by Black Panther, I'm asking the entire question. I'm like, dude, the fucking beach is like 30 feet that way. Why would you not just jump back in the water? That really didn't make sense to me, especially when he's flying around. I mean, you just fly down, take a little dip, come back up. Haha, fuck your plans, bitch. But overall, guys, I was entertained by this movie. I thought it was solid. I think it was certainly one of the more mature movies in the MCU, which is a nice change of pace that I have certainly been wanting in Phase 4 especially. And I need to watch Black Panther again, but I might like this one more than the first film. So for all the things that they had to overcome with this one, I think that Ryan Coogler and all the actors and everybody that worked on this did an exceptional job at rising above all of that, making a really solid sequel, while at the same time giving a very emotionally necessary goodbye to Chadwick Boseman's version of Black Panther. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for the rest of my reviews of 2022, all the new releases, and I'm also going to put my playlist up here of all my MCU reviews if you just want to check out the things on this universe. Please like and share this video, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future, including my MCU ranking this weekend, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.